Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Elaan of Troyius, which is episode 2 of season 3 of Star Trek, the original series. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek, the original series, one episode at a time. In this video, I cover the episode Elaan of Troyius. So, this is the episode where the Enterprise is ferrying a leader from a planet Elos. Her name is Elaan. She's the Dolman, and she is to be in a arranged marriage with the leader of the planet Troyius, which, in order to put an end to a conflict that had been going on for years, she has no desire to be in this marriage. She wants nothing to do with the Troyius people, who she finds repulsive. However, the council on her planet had deemed that she had to, so she's being very indigent and very rude, and even goes as far as to stab the ambassador from Troyius when he tries to teach her the ways of Troyius. And so Kirk steps in, slaps her around, says that she's spoiled, a spoiled brat that should be spanked. And then she cries, and Kirk tries to wipe her tears away, and inadvertently her tears are a magical love potion that makes Kirk madly in love with her, and then all of a sudden she's madly in love with Kirk. Then the Klingons attack, and they manage to find out that their planet is really rich in dilithium, which they think is quite common, and so Kirk uses the extra dilithium to power the Enterprise and defeat the Klingons, thus saving the day, and they deliver her to Troyius to marry the leader of that planet. And then McCoy comes up with a cure for the tears, but Spock says it's unnecessary because Kirk is madly in love with the Enterprise, and that's his cure. Historically, I've never liked this episode ever. Watching it now, and I think the last couple times I watched it, I thought it was okay. Like, there's things about this episode I do like, but there's other things that sabotage that like for it. Things that I like that I really do not like, that sort of interfere with me considering this a good episode. First of all, and you might sort of get this impression based off of how I chose to describe this episode, this episode is outdated. Outdated is another way of saying sexist. So basically, this woman is forced into a marriage which she absolutely does not consent to, and absolutely does not want to go through with. And so she's rude and throws shit around, and then Kirk deems that she's calls her names. After she hits him, he hits her back and says that she's being a spoiled brat because she refuses to go through with a marriage that she does not want, does not consent to. That I'm imagine, they never state this outright in the episode, but I imagine that she would be obligated to have a sexual relation with this person that she absolutely does not want to. Some sexual encounter, or multiple actually, a sexual relationship that she does not consent to, and Kirk slaps her and calls her a spoiled brat for not wanting to go along with this. Is there something wrong here? Now, I realize, and I know the pushback I would get, I can feel it coming, is that this is a modern perspective. And that this movie, or this episode, is based off of several Shakespeare plays that I'm not familiar with, like The Taming of the Shrew, I believe, and there's also like a Cleopatra play or something. I'm not sure. Hold on, let me look this up. hold on. I'm in the wrong page. But anyway, so I'm sure people will be like, and this was a common practice amongst many cultures or throughout history. And it was actually very common to make peace, as marriage was actually originated, not two people who fall in love. It originated as a way to bring two countries or two tribes together through an alliance, which is why one of my favorite memes is when it said, my girlfriend told me to treat her like a princess, so I married her off to the Prince of Denmark to make an alliance. Because really, that's what princesses were obligated to do. Yeah, so based off of Shakespeare's plays, Taming of the Shrew and Antony and Cleopatra. So here's the thing, and I am not necessarily bashing those plays, particularly because I've never seen them, never read them, so I don't really know. But here's the thing, I wouldn't, because like it or lump it, those were common practices in those times. But newsflash, Star Trek is taking place in the 24th century. So, therefore, ergo, i.e., looking at it from a modern perspective is very valid, because this is even beyond a modern perspective, because it's not just modern, it's the future. So it's really modern. At least that's how I would look at it. Therefore, to have a body like Starfleet, like the Federation, abide and agree to an arrangement which is outdated, and I told you what that means. And these advanced planets, by the way, they're not as advanced as like Starfleet or most of the Federation worlds, but they're still advanced enough for interstellar travel, to travel between two planets. It's within a star system, so I think they're implying that they don't have warp drive, that they can go to other star systems, but they never state that outright. But regardless, they're advanced enough to travel between planets, so they are really advanced, and yet they still practice these outdated barbaric rituals. And moreover, Starfleet is okay with that. And more okay, they demand it. They have diplomats coming to this wedding, and they want this wedding so they could seal their allegiance between these two planets. And Kirk slaps her around, calls her a spoiled brat, because she refuses to engage in a long lifetime sexual relationship that she does not want or consent to. So, and there's many modern, I know people would point out there's some cultures even in modern times that practice these rituals, and I would rail against those as well. There's been examples, and if it's consensual, like I know people in some of these cultures who are okay with this. Like if both parties consent to an arranged marriage, then that's another thing. And this is getting into whole Vulcans things, because they apparently have arranged marriages too. But that's one thing. And I knew some people from India who, were perfectly okay with it, and they thought it was weird from my Western perspective that this was weird to me. But that's fine, because they're consenting adults. They can do whatever they want. But it's when they're not consenting is the issue. And there's been modern cases of, say, like a 13-year-old girl forced to marry a 54-year-old man, which she has no intention of doing, and so she runs away to a Western country to escape that, and they try to extradite her back. Fuck that. There's a barbaric rituals, and I would fight for her right to stay in those Western countries. And I think this would be the case this episode presents a case that's more like the second example I gave and not the first example, because she does not consent to it. She says multiple times that she does not want to do it. And Kirk responds by calling her a brat and slapping her around. Now there is one line of dialogue which may throw some shade of gray into this that you're thinking I'm neglecting, but I noticed it, so I'll bring it up now, is that Kirk says, well, if you don't want this marriage, you give up your title of being a Dolman. If you're going to be a Dolman, you have to do what comes along with it. You have to, go in this forced marriage. And I don't think, that may slightly bend it to make it less offensive, but it's still offensive. It's still outdated. And, because you're saying, that's fine if you want to be forced into this marriage that comes along with a sexual relationship that will last the rest of your life, if for someone you don't even like and don't want to, never met before and absolutely don't want to do it, that's fine if you don't want to do it. All you have to do is give up all your worldly possessions and titles and lifestyle that you're used to. What a deal! No! That is still fucked up. I'm sorry. It absolutely is. And even the episode, I know, tries to portray like she's the bitch, like she's the asshole, like she's in the wrong because she's like throwing shit around. And at first, my instinctual, and I'm sure with most people, their instinctual gut reaction to watching this episode is to agree. Oh God, she's terrible. She's treating our great Captain Kirk very rudely. She stabbed that guy in the chest who was just trying to help her. God, she's insufferable. Until and that's what I thought. That's what my gut reaction until I thought about this logically. And thought about if I was forced to marry someone I absolutely did not want to against my will, I would fucking act that way too. And so, yeah. And so the fact is give up all your worldly possessions and all your titles and then you can go on your merry way. That's, I might take that offer, but that's still a fucked up thing to do. That doesn't make it better that they're doing that. So, no. I'm sorry. She's not in the wrong. So that is kind of my main gripe against this episode. But, if I look past that, which is kind of hard to do, but I kind of can, it is an interesting episode. I like the chemistry between Kirk. I actually thought it was interesting how Kirk was, refused to put up with her shit, even though I disagree with the circumstances of all that. I think she has every right to be pissy. But, he was sent by a mission to Federation. God, don't get me started. They're freaking, I don't know. I don't want to say a lot of nasty things about the Federation, but I'm moving on from that in this episode, how they support this. Barbaric. But anyway, so Kirk is okay. And he, if I had to look past this, I do find it interesting the way that Kirk tries to put her in her place. I did find it interesting how the guy tried to give her gifts and she just was rude about it. Now she had these guards, and when I must admit I did like the line where she kept saying you have to have my permission to leave, and when Kirk goes to leave, she's like, I did not give you permission to leave, and he's like, I did not ask for any. I did think that was cool. But here's the thing. Even though I was interested in that storyline, they completely pivot from that storyline and move into a different storyline that just comes out of nowhere, out of the blue, of the love potion tears, which I think is so dumb. It is so dumb. And it's because I was just getting into that storyline. I was looking past, how outdated this episode is. I was looking past that, and moving into getting into the storyline of Kirk having to teach this woman manners and how insufferable she was being, and I was getting into that storyline. It was interesting to me, and that she went as far as to stab the ambassador who wanted to give up, and they had this diplomatic mission to complete. So I was getting interested in that storyline, and then all of a sudden they come up with this love potion tears bullshit. Which is so cliche. It is so cliche. Main point, she pivots from being abstinent and being totally rude and insufferable to Kirk to being, oh, I love you. Why don't you stay with me? I'm going to follow you to the bridge because I love you. And Kirk is like, oh, I love you too, but I must save the ship. And so it becomes a totally different episode in a way that's not good. Like, there's some other episodes that can pivot from one plot to another and make it work. I'm thinking of like Sins of the Father from TNG, which that was a bit too rough of a transition, but even that was still a good episode. Whereas this is like, it makes it to something I was interested in, even though I had to look past all the outdated shit in it. But it goes from that to being a cliche, cartoonish, dumb story about love potions. Any story about love potions is, again, there's consent issues involved, and it's very outdated. But anyway, this, but it's also dumb. It's a very cartoonish and cliche, and I just thought it was the whole... Alright, so here's my main point about these love potion tears. I know that the ambassador to Troyius casually mentioned this to McCoy earlier in the episode to kind of set up for this to happen. But here's the thing. He shouldn't have casually mentioned it to McCoy. He should have formally stated for Kirk, Spock, and the official record, hey, be fucking careful when you are around her. Do not let her tears touch you, because you will be... And by the way, this love potion, as stated in this episode, has an effect that never goes away. That's forever. Eternal. You, for the rest of your life, will be madly in love with this woman. And he did not think to tell them about it, to give them some slight warning. Oh, hey, by the way, maybe don't touch her tears because you'll be madly in love with her for the rest of your fucking life. None of that occurred to him. And then after Kirk was infected, he was like, well, don't bother trying to find a cure. We've been trying to find a cure for this forever. This is demanding about them. This is something about their species we fucking hate. And we've been trying desperately to find the cure, but we've never been able to. Why are you just telling him this now? Why are you just telling him this now? Why the fuck were you a couple hours ago before Kirk fucking casually touched your tears? Because nobody warned him. So frustrating about this episode. Anyway, then there's a Klingon plot. And again, I found the Klingon plot interesting. I found the chase scenes with the Klingon ship and the Enterprise one of the most interesting, spaceship battles that the show has ever done. It's a shame that it's in this very questionable, very poor episode, but I liked it. It was suspenseful, like how they had a spy in Elan's party who sabotaged the Enterprise to make the warp drive. If they operated the warp drive, they would have exploded, and Scotty found it just in the nick of time. And so the Klingons kept trying to bait the Enterprise into using the warp drive, but when they realized that they probably discovered the sabotage and they weren't going to use the warp drive, there was the other issue of they were running out of power, and so the Klingons were attacking the Enterprise casually, trying to get them to use more power. And Kirk had to sort of use his wits, and then they found the lithium crystals on the necklace, and they were like, so that's why the Klingons are so interested in this planet, because it's rich in dilithium, which I thought was interesting, and they used the crystals to get out of the situation. That's very interesting. I was very engaged. It was very suspenseful. And Kirk managing to outwit the Klingons and going to warp at the exact right moment and to fire the 4 torpedoes on them. They damaged them enough, and how he refused to blow them up, because now Starfleet's deciding to act advanced and not like a primitive barbaric culture. But anyway, all of a sudden. But anyway, so yeah, so they outwit the Klingons and go back to Troyes. I found that interesting. That was engaging. I liked it. But as I said, it's in this episode with a fucking love potion tears and really outdated storylines. So yeah, I can only like this episode so much. So, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It does really help the channel continue to grow, and it's very much appreciated, so I will give a shout out to those who support me on Patreon. There's Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Brian A., Alessandro Michelasiu, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Neal Howes. Thank you all so much for your support. So now I got a couple Patreon comments on this episode to read. First comment is from Ricky, who says, yeah, this is the episode where Kirk is under a love spell that is so contrived and unbelievable. I mean, nobody warned the Enterprise about this condition, that any man could fall under a love spell. This episode is also a bit sexist, as this is making a woman, against her will, marry some guy in order to stop a war. I mean, this is the 23rd century. Also, the female character was so annoying and cringeworthy. It almost reminds me of the woman from Precious Cargo, also god-awful annoying, although to be fair, this woman isn't quite as horrible or aggravating, but still bad. But not one of the worst episodes of the show. There were some nuggets like the Klingons trying to intercept the Enterprise in order to stop the Alliance, so my rating is a 3 out of 10. Yeah, that reminds me, I was also going to mention that this episode reminded me of 2 other Star Trek episodes. One was Precious Cargo, as Ricky mentioned, and the other was The Perfect Mate from TNG, and both of those episodes, it was the same race. I actually looked it up to see if there was the same race as these ones, but apparently the Elasians, or whatever they're called, they're never seen again. Yeah, because it's very similar. It's similar to Precious Cargo in terms that she's being really annoying and like rude and throwing shit and being very conceited and stuck up. And in fact, I compared Precious Cargo to this episode that was basically emulating this episode, but way worse. I won't even get into Precious Cargo. God, that episode is bad. Hey, I will say this about this episode. At least the actress who plays Elaan is actually a decent actress and doesn't totally suck like the one in Precious Cargo. But anyway, and the other episode is The Perfect Mate, because it reminds me of that, because in that episode Picard like bonded and fell in love with this woman who was promised to marry another leader. But at least in that episode she consented to it. And even then, in that episode, Crusher and a lot of women were questioning the whole practice of what they were doing, but at least she fucking consented. This is more, can I say, more than that's more than I can say about the character in this episode. And yeah, Kurt smacks her around, calls her brat. Anyway, so next comment is from Brandon Neal Howes. Elaan of Troyius, or Helen of Troy. Get it? First off, arranged marriages are wrong. John Meredith Lucas should have made Elaan a spoiled brat or a woman. Lucas should have made Elaan a spoiled brat or a woman, but not both. I gotcha. Elaan has power, but no sense of responsibility, and don't even get me started on the clothes. Her bodyguards were actually wearing orange placemats. The security on the Enterprise is terrible. I felt really sorry for France Nguyen, whose main job was to throw a tantrum or a knife and utter lines like, "You cannot resist my love. My love." Damn straight. I wanted to give her a glory spanking, and I still do. Why is the Enterprise an interstellar taxi service? Why does this episode need so many plot threads? Elaan stabs Petrie in the back, and he's taken the sick bay and put on bed while lying on his back. This is something Brandon likes to point out. Apparently, never realized how often that happens in the original series. Anyway, Elaan's woman's tears make men fall in love with her. Well, that's a different excuse to get Kirk to make out with a woman, I suppose. Geez, has France Nguyen escaped from a Flash Gordon serial with clothes like that? Kirk, Mr. Spock, the woman on your planet, or logical, that's the only planet in the galaxy that can make that claim. Quote. Yeah, that's another outdated quote. Thanks for reminding me, Brandon. Anyway, yep. It was the 60s, and part of me enjoys the campy mess. It's only a small part, though. 3 spankings out of 10. You kind of love that scene, too, when Kirk is like, "Oh, I'll give you an old Earth custom called a spanking." And I'm like, shut up, you freaking whore dog, Kirk. And she even later, after they start making out, she's like, "Ooh, what is this spanking custom you were talking about?" Like, how does she know that's sexual? But anyway, Jesus Christ. Yeah, well, I think as far as the Enterprise being a taxi service, I mean, it's a diplomatic mission, so that I'm okay with. Like, that I can buy, but, yeah, and the fashion is something I've also seen criticized. Apparently some other critics were really brutal against the costumes in this episode. Like, I honestly don't think it's any worse than the original series does. The original series costumes are always terrible. It's just the 60s, and it's just the budget they had. So I don't think it's any worse than it usually is, but wearing placemats. That's funny. But here's another thing I noted, though, is that a lot of people, other critics and stuff I've been reading who hate season 3 and point out as being one of the worst seasons, point out that it actually had better production value. Like, it had better lighting and better cinematography and better sort of special effects. Which I can't speak to the special effects because most of them on the versions I'm watching have been replaced with the special edition ones. But I agree, actually. I've noticed that about the 3rd season so far, is that the lighting and the cinematography is better this season. So I guess that's one thing. Anyway, my rating for Elaan of Troyius out of 10. You know, I'm actually going to be a little bit more generous than my Patreon supporters. I'm going to give this a 4 poor. I think I was interested enough in the Klingon scenes, and I think they're still good. I think those Klingon battle scenes are still really good. And even the first part that's outdated was good. It was interesting. Like, this episode never bored me. I never was like, come on, get this piece of shit episode over, or I'm bored. I was interested throughout. The Love Potion Tears, however, is what tanked this episode. It's what forbids it from getting any higher than a 4. I cannot, in good conscience, give an episode with that dumbass Love Potion storyline any higher than a 4. But, because I can't give it any positive rating. But I think the rest of it saved this from being like a 3 or a 2. So my rating is a 4. So that is it for my review of Elaan of Troyius. Thank you so much for watching this video, and if you did enjoy it, please be sure to check out my channel as I cover Star Trek the Original Series, Star Trek Picard, and many other Star Trek shows and other shows, so be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.